As usual, I'd like to give a review of the three readings. For those who are arriving only now, a gentle reminder that the Mass has a beginning and an end, and it does not begin with a homily. It begins when it begins. In the first reading, we are told about a mountain of rich food and choice wines. What beautiful images of hope! A mountain to which all peoples are called to. And not only rich food and choice wines, in that mountain or on that mountain, the Lord's mountain, will destroy death forever. And that the hand of the Lord will rest on this mountain. Of course, you know better than to think of it as a real physical mountain. It's not about Mount Apo or Mount Makiling or Mount Hermon or Mount Sinai. It is not a particular place. It is a vision of things to come, a promise that should engender hope in the hearts of all. In the second reading, we are told by St. Paul, I can do all things in Him who strengthens me. And he talks about something all of us have experienced. There are times we have we have plenty. There are times we are in want. Times when we don't know where to get the money for tuition. And then times when money seems easy to come by. But St. Paul was saying that I can do all things in Him who strengthens me. A message of hope. Our response after the first reading was also a response in hope. I shall live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. Unfortunately, there are those of us who interpret scripture literally. They're called the fundamentalists. So the Jewish people think that God promised them a promised land, and they claim it as their own, and they think they have a right over against every other people's right to live in that land that they call Israel, artificially given to them by the United Nations in 1948. Fundamentalists interpret scripture literally. And if we do interpret scripture literally, then we're in trouble. For if we listen to the gospel, it is a parable. And a parable is a story whose message is not found in the details, but in the totality of the story. And therefore the parable has many layers of meaning. It has a literal sense, it has an allegorical sense, it has a spiritual sense. We are gathered here today not to talk of a particular mountain, because we have very few mountains in the Philippines. I climbed 13 of them when I was younger. And our highest mountain is Mount Apo, although it's contested now by some mountain in Mindanao, is just a fraction of the heights of the world's tallest mountains. Of course, Everest and the mountains in Europe and in the rest of the world. But we are not talking about a physical mountain. We're not talking about a promised land, which is our promised land. We are not Jews. But we were born of the faith, the great faith of the Hebrews, about a God who calls all peoples to His mountain filled with rich food and choice wines. The gospel talks about a wedding feast. And in the beginning of the parable, we are told how choice people were invited. But the choice people, some were indifferent, walang pakialam, walang pansin, hindi binigyang halaga ang paanyaya. And of those originally invited, there were those who just plain rejected the invitation. But all are invited. All are invited. And the story goes on to tell us how the wedding feast planner, or the father of the bridegroom, decided to tell his servants to invite everybody, because the Jews rejected the Lord. The Jews rejected the Messiah. And this is now where the allegorical, not the literal sense, comes in. We have to look at it from the totality of what Scripture tells us and pit it against the New Testament. We cannot interpret the Old Testament alone by itself. The Old Testament lies hidden in the New, and the New Testament explains the Old Testament. If we understand the Old Testament literally, then we have a big problem, which is our promised land. Our promised land is not on this earth. That mountain of the Lord is not a physical mountain. That banquet is not a real physical feast. It is the banquet of the kingdom that is to come, a kingdom that has already begun when Christ came into the world, no matter the rejection, no matter the indifference. And mind you, even here, even now, there is indifference and a whole lot of rejection. Rejection that comes from the nuns and the dons. The whole world now is filled. Yung mga apo ninyo, yung mga anak ninyo, hindi na nagsisimba. They are nuns. They are non-believers, but they are non-atheists. They are non-committed. The world of nuns. And there are also dons. I'm done with my Catholic faith. Tapos na yung mga taon ko sa Ateneo, sa UST, sa Don Bosco, sa Kulasa, sa Assumption. I'm done with all this stupidity of faith that has to do with a God I don't see. A God who seems powerless to control the wars and the war freaks and warmongers in our midst. The world of nuns and dons, it is already here. Because yung mga apo ninyo nasaan? Yung inyong mga anak. I know because I've been an educator for 48 years. This is my 48th year. And I know how difficult it is now to teach young people. Much harder than the young people I was teaching 30, 40 years ago. Now, they are polite, they would listen to you. But we are nuns, we are non-committed. We are non-atheists, but we are also non-believers. We are just spiritual beings, spiritual. I am not religious. And that is their argument. You don't need to be religious. You just need to be spiritual. And spiritual means a vague sense of attachment to some vague divinity, to some vague religious spirit that hovers over us like a guardian angel. Yan ang dahilan kung bakit ngayon ay tanyag ang guardian angel. That's New Age. Ang dami kong nakikitang mga binibentang mga larawan ng mga anghel. Pinagsisikapan bigyan pa ng pangalan. There are only 3 names revealed in Scripture of the archangels. But there are now people inventing names for their angels. It is New Age. It is a way of domesticating God, making God, putting Him in a pocket. Pati ang estatwa ng Santo Niño, merong Santo Niño de Palaboy, parang galing sa kalye. May Santo Niño de la Suerte, yung may supot na may lamang ginto. At yan ang binibenta at ibinibili ng mga tao. May Santo Niño nakasuot ng piloto. May Santo Niño parang Wonder Woman. This is New Age. This is domesticating God. This is vague spirituality. But the faith that we are all called to is to go up the mountain of the Lord. And going up the mountain of the Lord means, as St. Paul says, I can do all things in Him who strengthens me, in plenty or in want. But now the prosperity gospel preachers coming from America all talk about prosperity. that if you believe, you will become rich. Si Pacquiao, hindi ako nagmumura, si Pastor Kibuloy. Yan ang kanyang, our local version of the gospel of prosperity. That the gospel talks about a wedding feast. By itself, the image seems to talk about riches and plenty. Well, in the beginning, the Lord invited, the chosen people of God, who are now claiming the land of Israel as their own and nobody else has any right to it, even if the Palestinians have lived there for centuries, for thousands of years. We have people who are indifferent and downright rejecting, and that includes you and me. So now, the gospel ends with everybody being invited, and then here comes one who was not properly dressed. No ID, no entry. Yan ang motto ng mga security guard, di ba? Pero may kahulugan din yan sa atin. Kung hindi tayo tama, wala tayong ID, wala tayong tamang kasuotan, hindi tayo karapat-dapat. Anong ibig sabihin nito? This is now the spiritual sense of Scripture, no longer the literal sense. What type of vestments or clothing should we have? It is not about wearing the right ID or the right uniform. It has to do with being committed. So the world of nuns and dons, you're not properly dressed. Why? If last week I told you na the kingdom belongs to those who have panukli, yung merong iaalay din eh. The kingdom belongs to those who have something to bring back as an offering to God. Today we should say that the kingdom belongs to those who are properly committed, properly motivated, and who behave accordingly, in accordance with their commitment. We are invited, yes, but we need to shape up. We have homework to do. We have something to fulfill. Christianity is not a fad. It is a commitment. There is no place for complaining, indifferent, spoiled brats. We are all invited to the kingdom, yes, to the banquet of the kingdom, but we need to do our homework. The first reading is one of hope and promise. No doubt, the mountain of the Lord full of rich food and choice wines. And then our answer is a prayer of hope. I shall live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. It is the image of God's holy mountain. We Christians, born of the great Hebrew faith, claim in that hope, in the spirit of that hope, I shall live in the house of the Lord. But one's faith and the same hope are not magic words. They are not magic words that when you have it, presto, you have it, you got it. We do not always get what we want. Sometimes we are in pain, sometimes we are sick. Like me, I'm suffering from this allergic cough. I don't cough during the night, but when I talk, that's when I cough. And that's my bread and butter, comes from preaching, teaching, and talking. And I feel despondent time and time again. We are all invited to the heavenly banquet, but we need to do our part. Rejection, indifference won't make the cut for us. It is not a matter of siding with the Israelites and saying they will never be beaten because they are the chosen people of God. They have rejected the Messiah. It is not about making a choice between Putin and the Ukrainians. We reject violence. We reject murder and hapless infliction of suffering to the innocent. It's not a matter of choosing between Nokor and Sokor. It's not a matter of being in favor of China or a friend of China or against China. We are against all forms of injustice because the mountain of the Lord is filled with rich food and choice wines. And the rich food and choice wines have to do with the blessedness associated with salvation. Whatever is true, whatever is good, whatever is worthy of praise, whatever is honorable, whatever is worthy of God. Killing people in cold blood. 2.3 million innocent Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, all 25 miles and 8 miles across. 2.3 million. Surely not all of them are terrorists, and they don't deserve to die. But there are people who claim mistakenly that they are the chosen people of God. So if you're a Catholic and you believe in God, you have a right now to make other people suffer. If we are Catholics and we come to Mass, we have a right now to park our 3 or 4 cars outside the door, outside the street, depriving others of what is their own. If we are Catholics and come to Mass every Sunday, we can now put a garden on the sidewalk and deprive the poor of the sidewalk and walk and compete with tricycles and cars and everything else. I shall live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. Yes, but the house of the Lord belongs to everybody, not only those who claim they believe in God. We need all to shape up. We need to put on the right vestment to be worthy of that feast. May God have mercy on us all.